um, are aware of the fact that I'm going to begin putting restoration agriculture into a context, uh, and it didn't just appear out of nowhere. And one of the most important contexts that we need to put it into is the context of nature itself and ecological systems, of which we're going to be designing ecological systems, and we're going to be living in them and working with them. And I found as I was so what's going to happen over the next 20 plus sessions, depending on how fast we can get through them. I'll be going through an entire college level curriculum on forest ecology. Obviously not as in depth, and you're not going to have to do any math like you would in college. But we'll go through all the general principles. And while I was putting this together, I realized that I couldn't remove forest ecology from my own personal context, and how I see ecology and ecological principles now is not the same as it was when I was a student, some 30 years ago. So this is going to be an introduction to forest ecology, but all through it, I'm going to be applying forest ecology principles to land management. And the picture right here of the farm, of New Forest Farm, that is, I eat, sleep, and drink, and breathe, ecology principles on a daily basis. But that's not how I always was, and I tried to move the slide, Wayne, and it wouldn't let me, so you're going to have to go to the next one, if he's even still there. There we go. I grew up in north central Massachusetts at the tail end of the industrial boom. It actually was quite a collapse in the northeastern part of the region. It used to be heavily manufacturing. There was factories galore. It was on the Nashua River, which I don't know how many hundreds of mills were on the river. Everything from paper to carpets to a lot of metalworking, shoe factories, leather tanneries, weaving looms, all sorts of things. And these are some of the ruins that appeared during my childhood. I got to see them slowly crumble and fall apart. So I've seen a collapse of Rome. And if you look at this building on the lower left, that was one of my favorite department stores. There were 5 different stories, 5 different levels, floors in there. This was like before any big box Walmarts. The building has now been gutted and renovated. If you look at the picture in the upper left, there's a triple-decker apartment building. That's an apartment building that I actually lived in on the 2nd floor there when I was a lot younger. And that seemed to skip ahead pretty fast. But during that time, as I was growing up, I think I was probably 17 or 18 when I bumped into this book. Hey, who stole my screen back? There we go, thank you. I was 17 or 18 when I discovered Tree Crops by J. Russell Smith. It was originally written in 1926. And look right there, the small letter title, Tree Crops, A Permanent Agriculture. That's the first time I ever saw the words permanent and agriculture intentionally combined. So what Smith was proposing is that we grow tree crops to produce seeds for our livestock, because in his day, 40 to 50% of all annual grains were fed to animals, and so he figured, why cut down forests and plant corn to wash away the soil? Why not keep the forests there, have the seeds be productive, hickories, and now who's moving the slides? It's not me. Is that you, Wayne?
I'm not intentionally. No, I was trying to go to the question. Sorry about that. I'll be going backwards here. Which one do you want to go back to?
Go back to the first Red River, right there. Well, that's good. Either one is fine. The big game when I was little was to guess what color the river was. It seems to be that the pictures that you can find the most on the internet are the ones when it was red. My favorite color was blue, like the shirt I'm wearing tonight. And these were the industrial dyes and chemicals that were dumped into the river from all the factories, mostly from paper and leather dyeing facilities. And so on the one hand, I got to see the collapse of the industrial economy. I got to see all these factories fall apart into ruins. I got to see the area when it was probably at the peak of its pollution. There's some radioactive waste dumps that are still, every time you drive by it on the highway, you get the equivalent of a X-ray dose worth of radiation. There's several different Superfund toxic waste cleanup sites. The Little League field where I played baseball was built on top of a toxic waste dump. Several different whole entire municipalities have water that's contaminated from industrial chemicals. So I got to see this horrible destruction. And who's advancing slides?
I'm keep trying to scroll on the questions, and it literally goes ahead. Do you want to go back one more, Mark?
Go back one more, yeah. Because this previous one says the promise of restoration. You can see where early on I started to get this idea that systems can be restored. I saw this red river. I saw this blue river, green, orange river. I saw it clean up. It took, all kinds of citizen activism. It took a legal action, and it took a little bit of what I guess we would call ecological sabotage before they finally installed wastewater treatment plants. Well, then the industrial collapse, many of the factories just aren't there anymore. So I got to see the river restored. It came back to life. By the time I was a senior in high school, I saw fish swimming in the river again. When I was in first grade, one of my buddies fell in the Red River and got a rash, was hospitalized for a week, had a hard time breathing. Now, I tried to advance that, and it advanced, so maybe I do have screen control back again. So also, look at the foliage on the side of the stream. I got to see that when we stopped insulting the planet, it would actually restore. It would come back to life to a certain degree of health and vitality again. And so I was inspired. I first went to college, had a brief stint in the military, and went to college for engineering. I failed to thrive in both the military and in engineering, so I quit and went back to school at Unity College in Maine. Here's a little map of the campus. It's there are many more buildings now. All these buildings are new since I attended there. The only ones that were there when I attended were these the East View, West View, and the facilities shop. It, at the time, was the only college in the USA that was exclusively studies of the environment, and it actually still graduates more Maine forest wardens, and fish and game officers than any other college in Maine. So I went to Unity College in Maine to study ecology. And it's while there that I started running into all these different texts. This forest ecology textbook is a newer version of the textbook that I used. So what we're going to be going through is this is the outline, Forest Ecology, 4th edition. We're going to be going through that outline in the next umpteen weeks, probably at least 20 weeks before we can plow through all of this. And I'll fill it in with all the other information from the other books as we go. So I went from being inspired by tree crops. Then I go to university. I start getting a college-level scientific education. And I found myself in a laboratory looking out the window, wishing that I was outdoors, because I thought ecologists, here I am studying ecology, I thought ecologists studied nature and all that. So I heard about the closing of the homestead laws up in Alaska. And so what I did is I went up, I claimed some land, and I came back and got my sweetheart, and the two of us got married, and we went up to this place here. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but if you go straight towards this pointy mountain in the center.
We can see a cursor, Mark. The cursor is really clear. So.
You can?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So you go towards this mountain here, and you go around the base to the left of it, and you go around that buttress, and then you go around that way, and the next valley over, you cross through it, and then you go into the second valley over, was where our homestead was. So we're going to come in like right along here and be at the base of this mountain next. If the slide advances for me. There we go. That's Mount Sanford, 16,235. These are the Wrangell Mountains in the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park. It's the highest concentration of peaks in excess of 12,000 feet in North America. Then we would go around Sanford. This would be on our right. I was never able to get a photograph of this mountain because it was always in the clouds. I had to get this one off online. So then we would go to the left of this set of mountains and come up onto this green ridge. It seemed like a low green ridge, but this hill itself was actually 5,000 foot high. Stop off, get a little water, continue to the left, and then once we go across the left off screen, we enter into this valley. Whoop, why did it go two? We enter into this valley, and you see this cloud above these mountains here. That's a cloud that's almost always there. On the other side of that range is the Nebesna Glacier, which is the longest land-based terrestrial glacier in North America. It's some 75, 80 miles long. Always had a cloud on it. And so we would come off that ridge from that lake, around up through this valley, and then down this creek, zigzagging back and forth, and look at the forest cover. Then we get out here. This was all open. This is naturally open because what's fascinating about the streams there, the creeks, the smaller creeks, is the ground is permanently frozen. The rocks at the bottom would collect ice around it. And then what that meant is some of the volume of where the creek was would now be taken up by ice. So the level of the creek would rise. Then there would be more ice forms here. Then the creek would move this way. The more ice would form this way. And it would overflow back and forth and make terraces that looked a lot like Mammoth Hot Springs and stuff like that at Yellowstone. But this clearing right here, notice the square corner. Even up in Alaska, where I homesteaded, my wife and I were up there for 8 years, this is the view from my cabin window. Even up there, we witnessed people destroying their ecosystem in order to gain a livelihood. This guy down on the bottom of the valley here with these who cleared this whole peninsula of trees, didn't even insulate his house because he said he couldn't afford to buy insulation because he needed money for his snowmobile and gas for the chainsaw so he could keep his family warm. Weird reasoning, but that's like a miniaturized version of the state of humanity right now. Is somehow we have to figure out how to live on this planet without screwing it up, without destroying it in order to gain our livelihood. And that's why an understanding of ecology is absolutely critical for what we're going to be doing. It was while I was in Alaska that I started writing a book, brought notes to a friend of mine who was an English major. His name is Michael. He said, "Oh, you don't need to write that book. That's already been written. It's called Permaculture. It's a photograph of first edition Permaculture Designer's Manual. It now has a different cover on it and all that kind of stuff, but that was my copy right there. It was so long ago that everybody who'd ever taken a design course had their name and address listed in the back of it. And there was only a couple hundred people. That was rather difficult to get, and it wasn't any, it's about the same price to buy it back then as it is now. So it's a real relative bargain nowadays. Permaculture, of course, it's a contraction of two words, permanent and agriculture, which is how I first learned it. I learned from this guy right here, Bill Mollison. He signed my diploma. This is the picture of the new cover on the designer's manual. And what really turned me around is when I heard a video from a global gardener. You guys can find it online somewhere, where he defined permaculture as an ecological design methodology where we create relationships between materials, plants, animals, and humans so that their function and their yield are optimized. That really got my attention. Then all of a sudden I heard Bill Mollison say it in Australian, and I don't speak Australian. He says the aim is to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable. And that sentence in white right here is what I'm all about. I spent my life working on. So what restoration agriculture is all about, and what we hope to be doing here at Restoration Agriculture Development and Eat and Seed is that we're not necessarily intending to train people to draw designs. We're not necessarily intending to train people to train other people, to train other people, to train other people. One of our goals is to get people trained and competent in living this way and actually implementing systems and doing genuine ecological restoration while simultaneously earning a profit, livelihood from that kind of restoration work. So, okay, so now I've got this end of industrial experience in my childhood. I've encountered tree crops by J. Russell Smith, and then I've gotten education in ecology from Unity College in Maine. Now I'm steeped in permaculture. What I like about it is the ethics, and I'm always finding myself, I think this way. I think that whatever I do, I want to be taking care of the planet and its natural systems around me. You know, plants, animals, land, water, air. I always want to be doing what I can to help the planet to be a healthier, greener place to live. And I want to be helping people. I want to help people to feed themselves, to educate themselves. I want to, you know, help us with healing, with proper nutrition, etc. And the third thing here on the big ethics of permaculture, even permaculturists can't agree what this is. I've heard it everything from reinvest the surplus to fair share to I like the equitable exchange of ecologically produced surplus. We have to have some sort of distribution system where we're exchanging goods and services in a fair manner so that people's basic needs are met and people are actually rewarded for risk and innovation, and people are disincentivized, that's a word, I suppose, to not be a total parasite on the system. We need to somehow find some magic tension to create a new type of economic system that rewards behaviors that help care for the earth and care for people, and doesn't necessarily reward behaviors that are just purely parasitic or evil, for crying out loud. It was when I was in Alaska that this book came out, Permaculture Principles and Pathways, by David Holmgren. Now, I hadn't realized how significant this was in my background thinking until I went through this again. It's David Holmgren who first came up with how we implement the ethics of permaculture is through a set of principles. And he outlined 12 in this book, Permaculture Principles and Pathways. And I'll put them right here, and you guys, if you can, you know, take a mental picture of this, get a screenshot, or go online to just do a search for David Holmgren's book there, and you'll be able to go to the website, and there's a different icon and a different page for every single one of these principles. But we want to observe, imitate, and interact with nature. We want to capture and store energy, obtain a yield, and yield can mean many things, from food to artistic to industrial ingredients to beauty to spiritual renewal, etc. Apply self-regulation and accept feedback. And remember, no matter which end of the horse you're working with, there's nothing like a cold Kansas City sarsaparilla. We want to use and value renewable resources and services, produce no waste, design from patterns of details, integrate rather than segregate, use small and slow solutions, use and value diversity, use edges and value the marginal, creatively use and respond to change. So much of what I'll be talking about with forest ecology, I'll be dropping these particular principles in. There are certain ones of these principles that I think are more important than others. If you're going to actually get a piece of property and do a restoration agriculture, a perennial agriculture, farming or ranching operation, there are some of these principles that are more significant than others, and I'll emphasize those. The ones that I emphasize the most is observe, imitate, and interact. That one right there has been so missed by so many different permaculturists. Here's some permaculture principles from Bill Mollison. His first one was observe and imitate nature, interact with it, and accept feedback. Both of these guys are saying observe. then imitate and interact. And until we've done that, we've missed the boat. And that's the whole magical difference of restoration agriculture, is that it is directly observing nature. We're directly modeling after nature. We're not inventing new guilds and plant associations and whatnot. We're just replanting natural ecological systems. The one I like, of course, work with nature rather than fight against it, do the least amount of work, has the greatest long-term effect, understand and use natural succession, create integrated cyclical systems. All of this, all of ecology plays through me, it plays through those principles, and that's how I see the world, is through those principles. I really do. I'm a little bit surprised at how deeply they've kind of become embedded in me. Also, while in Alaska, I finally tracked down this book here, Water for Every Farm, the Yeoman's Keyline Plan. It's easily available from Acres USA if you want to get it. These days, it's pretty easy to get. It's not easy reading. It's rather challenging to read. The guy invented a whole bunch of new vocabulary that isn't consistent or compatible with a lot of civil engineering and geology and hydrogeology. But what I found the most significant out of that book was this little 8-step outline here, his keyline scale of permanence. And it's a decision, helps you with your decision making. It's like an order of operations based on how much effect it will have and how permanent it will be in the landscape. And let's take climate. Well, climate, we don't really have a lot of direct personal control over it, so we don't really want to spend a lot of time trying to control it or change it. We have to adapt to it and mitigate some of the effects of it. The land shape, if you live in the bottom of a pit, a low spot, geologically for miles and miles around, you're not about to turn that into a mountain. You can turn a mountain into a pit if you want to do mountaintop removal for coal, but that's not necessarily what we're going to do. So the land shape, we really don't have a lot of control over. But water, once we get to water, the pattern that you see in the background picture here, that pattern is based on just changing the farming, the direction of fields by running channels and mounds, by using a subsoil in a certain direction, and the whole pattern is to spread the water from the valleys out to the ridges. That water pattern right there, it's the least amount of work for the greatest long-term effect. That now determines where the roads go, tells us where we plant our trees, tells us where the buildings go, and it will help us with further dividing into smaller and smaller fields. And what I like about this here is last on his list is soil. Soil is easy to change. It really is. So many organic farming workshops, curriculum, etc., books that you go to, it's all about the soil, all about the soil, all about the soil. The soil's not as significant as a lot of organic folks would lead you to believe, especially when you start dealing with woody plants, which we are. I mean, you look at that picture here, there's a lot of different woody plants, and most everybody has seen trees growing out of cliffs. They grow out of cliffs just fine with no soil whatsoever. So, now why did the slide? There we go. Then eventually from Alaska, my wife and I and infant son and 2 dogs took all of our worldly possessions in a 20-foot trailer that I've been repainting 20 years later. And we moved to southwest Wisconsin, bought the farm. And the farm, when we bought it, was mostly abandoned cropland or overgrazed pasture. There's only about 3 acres of trees. They're about 14 foot tall, 3-4 inch diameter trunks at the biggest. And we've planted literally hundreds of thousands of trees in the past 20 years in very specific patterns. And so I've gotten to experience ecological succession. I've been able to live inside of a successional process of converting this back from degraded agricultural land into a mimic of its natural system of what was there. And so, and I wrote a book about it. Yay, buy it from Acres USA. Please don't buy it from Amazon. It's real-world permaculture for farmers, permanent agriculture. Now, what also is significantly different about restoration agriculture is we're talking about the growing of staple food crops, our carbohydrates, proteins, and oils. Not necessarily making cool brick ovens or mud ovens or rocket stoves. We want to create context-specific solutions. So if we don't have clay to make a clay oven, we don't. We use stone instead. Instead of having a cute idea of capturing water off our roof, let's do a real design. We're doing real agricultural engineering here. If we have a 10 by 10 surface area that sheds water, that sheds 62 gallons of water in a 1-inch rain, how do I get that water from that surface to a storage facility? How big does that storage facility have to be? How many rains do we get before we start using the water? Where do we want to move the water to? And we design a system based on actual reality and then grow tons of food. And this picture in the upper right and the lower left, these are great examples of what I think everybody's permaculture yard should look like. We should have all these vitamin greens all over the place because that's the freshest food. We have the ability to have lots of labor, hyper mineralized, super nutritious produce, but this will not feed you. There's not enough calories, carbohydrates, proteins, and oils to keep a body alive. All of these people is grown on farms. So we're going to design farms modeled after natural ecosystems that follow ecological laws and principles that are reality-based and context-specific. And this is the kind of the short that I put together here. It's written about in the book. Identify our biome and its keystone species. That right here, first step, we're just going to identify our biome, keystone species. We need to have an ecological understanding. So that's why we're going to be going through this program on forest ecology, so we can identify our biome. How does it work? How does it operate? And that's where, so step one, we're going to spend a lot of time, like 20 plus weeks on ecosystem mimicry and how to work within it. Then we do a little bit of earthworks and water management. We'll be establishing polycultures, perennial polycultures. Fences and roads and utilities and pipelines will follow the pattern of our water management strategy. We use agroforestry practices to transition from annual crops to eventual total perennials, or as many perennials as you possibly can. And then we just manage and manage and manage and manage. And the management is going to constantly change, because this picture right here with the pig, that's 15 years since it was a cornfield. So when I started, this picture right here was corn stubble. Then I got pasture reestablished, did the water management, started planting trees, added more trees and shrubs and bushes and vines and livestock, and started grazing it. So 15 years into the program, this is what it looks like. Our management is always going to be different. Now, if we don't have an ecological understanding, we may be surprised all of a sudden this year is like, oh my gosh, look what's happening to me. This is taken over, or that's taken over. My pasture is not as good as it used to be. But if we have a little bit of an ecological understanding, we know what challenges are coming toward us. And my biggest challenge right now that I knew was coming towards me was that eventually I would have to get into a situation where I've got to cut and cut and cut and cut wood. I didn't think it was going to happen in 20 short years. I almost can't now. So these are some of the major biomes of the world. Some of the names we're going to throw out here: tundra, northern conifer forest, tropical rainforest. These are some basic terms in ecology that describe different systems, ecological systems, and we'll get more into this as we go. Rainforest, tropical rainforest, deciduous forest, grassland, savanna, desert, chaparral, scrub forest. Different regions with different temperature regimes, different moisture regimes, different bedrock, which will turn into a different soil type. All of them will support different species of plant life, which of course will support different species of animal life. And I apologize for those who are not in North America for the North America-centric perspective here. One of the things that you see here, I'm getting a little bit ahead, but I like this slide because of what it has here. One of the ways in forest ecology to categorize regions is by the forest type. And this map right here has forest types written down. If you say white, red, jack pine, forest type is all this brown. I don't even see any brown there. Where's brown? Then this turquoise spruce fir up in this region here, this region over here. Longleaf and slash pine further down south. Loblolly and shortleaf pine all through here. Oak pine, oak hickory. This is describing a region by the dominant trees, the trees that last the longest. They will chemically change the soil. They'll bacterially and fungally change the soil. And nothing will be able to live in an oak pine forest unless it's compatible with oak pine forest. If something from a maple beech birch forest will not necessarily survive in oak pine or white pine, red pine, jack pine, loblolly. So we need to have a little bit of ecological understanding on what kind of systems we're working with. This is one of the maps that I chose to work with, and where I'm located in southwest Wisconsin is right here between a mesic southern oak forest and oak savanna, and we'll cover that later on. I'm not going to spend too much time here other than the fact that we have archaeological history going back geological eons that show that closed canopy forest, where the trees close the canopy, shut out light from reaching the ground, and there's no more grasses growing underneath, those have been in the minority historically for at least the past 90 million years or so, going all the way back a couple ice ages. I think 4 different ice ages. It's been savanna except for pockets of forest. Here and here and down here were the only places where it was closed canopy